Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest today is Shweta Shanbhag. She's director of product management at PointClickCare. Welcome, Shweta.
Thank you, John. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, we've been doing some work together, a bunch of research, dove into a lot of interesting trends in the industry, and PointClickCare is on top of so many things these days. But before we dive into some of those details, tell us a little bit about yourself and PointClickCare.
Yeah, of course. Like you said, I'm the director of product at PointClickCare. My portfolio is largely the pack management set of tools that we have for risk-bearing entities. But personally, I have been in healthcare for pretty much my whole career. For almost 2 decades now, I've been working with providers and payers on population health and value-based care. So still sort of bringing the same experience here to PointClickCare. And as for the company, we have been, again, a leader in post-acute analytics. So we started, our core is really within the EHR. That's where we have our roots for SNF customers for post-acute. But we've also sort of expanded more into kind of visibility for risk-bearing entities as well.
Yeah. It's amazing to see how PointClickCare has expanded into the acute side and bridging the gap, which that's kind of what we want to talk about. Like post-acute care is evolving faster than ever. Like how are payer and provider organizations elevating their post-acute care strategies and what shifts are you seeing across the industry?
Yeah. It's interesting. Again, since I've had this background and I've worked with providers and payers for so long, I think one of the biggest challenges we've always seen with value-based care is really at its core visibility, right? So
Mhm.
I think we've talked about it. Everyone's trying to acknowledge it and address it. Once I actually, as an anecdote, I had a provider say to me, trying to succeed in like a value-based care relationship is almost like driving a car with all your windows blacked out except the rear view mirror, right? So really the shift I think is more towards this proactive management versus this reactive oversight that we've seen. And what's exciting to me that I'm seeing now is really that mindset shift. And like you said, I think post-acute care is being elevated more as a strategic lever and not just an afterthought. Because if you think about it, I think we've seen the numbers about at least 1 out of 5 Medicare acute stays result in a SNF visit. I think that's what we see. So it is a pretty critical part of the journey as well. So I think a lot of it is in building these preferred networks, in trying to kind of align on shared goals, I mean, ultimately, the goal is the same, is the reduction of readmissions and a better outcome for their patients. So I think we're just starting to sort of see that shift towards basically this more collaborative effort.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about that evolution that the EHR in general, regardless of which section of
Right.
healthcare, what used to be a system of record, now it's being more proactively used,
Yeah.
to actually impact care. So talk to me about why is the real-time data exchange, so central to transforming post-acute care, and where are you seeing some of the most promising progress when it comes to sharing data?
Yeah, in my mind, real-time data is really what will help turn the collaboration from just an intention to an action, right? Like,
Mhm.
so I think we've heard this a lot from our customers. Timeliness really matters because otherwise, using that previous analogy, the teams are still driving with the rearview mirror as their reference. So I think what we are seeing is that if data arrives weeks or even days later, it's you're still documenting performance. You're not actually improving the care itself. So having that visibility and really not just the data, but having visibility into the timely signals, I think is what's most important. Because then all the teams, whether it is on the post-acute side, whether it's the care management or on teams on the health system or the provider sides, they're all operating from kind of the same set of data.
Yeah. I mean, it's a common theme we hear over and over at Healthcare IT Today. Like, you can't just dump data on me, right? Like I
Right.
need to know what matters. I need to know what of that data is meaningful, for lack of a better term. But like, which metrics do you think truly do reflect like meaningful improvement in post-acute care, and how can teams focus on the outcomes that matter most, within that data and within that collaboration?
Yeah, I think the ones that are most meaningful in terms of metrics are really ones that capture the whole episode and not just a single setting or a
Mm,
single point in time. Readmissions obviously are like one of the most important metrics, but if you think about it, it's kind of a lagging metric, right? Like you're doing it after the fact. It's a little bit too late to change that outcome at that point. So what we're seeing is more like a growing focus on things like quality of transitions, like how
mm,
complete was the handoff when those happened, timeliness of intervention, for example, like once you identified a risk, what was done and how quickly. Um, Also for acute entities, I think it's also important for them becoming more and more important for them to just gauge from their post-acute partners who are consistently driving a positive or a better outcome. So I think there are a lot of sort of, if you will, like process measures and metrics that we see going
mhm.
into play, but really the key at any point is going to be alignment. So all of these different stakeholders coming to the table, if they can agree on a small set of, say, shared metrics, but also make sure that there's visibility consistently to it, like they're looking at it, whether it's every week, every 2 weeks, right, with their
Mm.
partners, then that those metrics can actually help drive behavior.
Yeah, I think creating that alignment is one of the most powerful things. But what are some of the best practices that are helping healthcare organizations build and sustain these high-performing partnerships that deliver the strong patient outcomes that we want and create that alignment? Or do you have some ideas on some of those best practices that are helping organizations?
Yeah, we definitely work with a lot of risk-bearing entities who are
Mm,
trying sort of innovative, different approaches. But what I see as a theme amongst them is really that sentiment of shared accountability and like working towards the same goal for the patient, right? Like when that's acknowledged, I think the process gets significantly easier. For complex patients, if you think about it, there is such a large care team behind them. So whether it is the providers who are in the acute setting, the post-acute, like the SNFs, the other post-acute providers, you sometimes have specialists, you have the primary care provider, you have payers, like all of these are trying to work towards the same outcome, really. And at any given moment, again, for the lack of a better analogy, one team is quarterbacking the care, but the
mm.
rest of the team is still very important, and it still matters that they have visibility into the process so they can collectively move that ball forward. So I think what we're seeing is really, um, as we said before, insights are really where it's at, that's what matters, right? Like instead of again dumping a lot of this data on staff that is already stretched pretty thin, they are trying these organizations and really as we see them succeed, the best in class organizations are trying to invest in sort of shared insights. They're trying to have clear expectations across all of these stakeholders, and they're trying also to sort of implement some sort of a continuous feedback mechanism so they can all be aligned on things as they move these patients towards their outcomes.
Yeah. One of the takeaways I had coming out of the PointClickCare user event was just how focused PointClickCare is on moving to value-based care and supporting organizations. Your CEO on stage made it an important point as part of the keynote, which I was fascinated by. I'd love to hear more about like how is PointClickCare helping organizations align around these shared insights and these stronger coordination efforts and eventually improve performances.
Yeah. Like I said before, I think our roots are in skilled nursing. We started here. The goal was always to help SNFs and other post-acute entities make their workflows better and have sort of be more efficient. And that still remains our core, but having the best internal workflows are still not going to help them deliver outcomes if they are doing it in isolation. And I think we
Mm,
recognize that. So really, I think as we think about how we deliver new capabilities. The goals for us are twofold. One is still within the SNF. How do we make sure that we are continuing to streamline those workflows and helping them reduce friction and administrative burden so they can focus on the care? But also thinking about that cross continuum to say, how do we make it easier for them to coordinate care?
Mm.
Um, with other acute providers and other risk-bearing entities so that they can be successful collectively. And I think where what we are seeing is increasingly AI just given the timing has been really helpful and is helping us play a critical role. So to those signals we were talking about earlier, like an example is we have something called a predictive return to hospital score, right? Like, and again, that's surfaced in several parts of our products. And it's helping a lot of these teams sort of identify those patients who might be at increased risk and then move towards intervention early, but also really intentionally, because now you understand who to prioritize and what risk factors to address. So I think overall, like from PointClickCare's perspective, we are trying to enable a more coordinated and really bi-directional approach to addressing all of these patients and their care as they come into the post-acute world. And the goal is the same, right? Like help these patients recover in the right setting at the right time and with fewer avoidable setbacks. So that's sort of what forms the foundation for a lot of our roadmap.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating to think what you just said. Like, if you want to support SNFs to be, in post-acute care to effectively care for the patient, then we have to bridge the gap of data in
Yeah.
order to do that. That's a really interesting point. And quite frankly, it's very personal for me now. My aunt's literally going through this. And so, obviously I'm completely biased in this moment that you're successful at it, but in general, in healthcare, it matters a lot as well. So I appreciate all the work that you're doing there.
Yeah, and it is a journey, right? Like if you think about it, a decade ago, this was the same, or maybe more even. This was a problem in acute. It still continues to be. Like there are
Mhm.
mechanisms that are helping sort of this interoperability, flow of data, all of that. But it takes time to make a lot of these changes. I think ultimately what will help is really that it's really that mindset of
Mm,
it's one patient, even if the care teams are different, they're
sure.
all working towards the same goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Shweta, I appreciate you taking time to talk with us and share about the work you're doing to bridge that gap and to help post-acute care and acute care, better care for the patient. So thanks so much. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcast applications. Thanks, Shweta.
Thank you, John. It's nice chatting.